The elite's plan to take over the entire global economy has been underway for a long time. And when I say global elites, I'm talking about the NGOs, or the non-government organizations. Or for plain English, I'm talking about non-elected leaders who are really running the world. Now, I'm talking about three-letter organizations such as the IMF, the WEF, the WHO, the WTO. And today, we're going to talk about one that you've probably never heard of. It is the WMO. Now, the IMF's been taking over the world's money. The WHO is taking over our health, our medical treatments. The WEF, the World Economic Forum, you've probably been hearing a lot about it. They've been telling us their plans for the Great Reset, where Klaus Schwab is calling for a great reset of capitalism and equality. And now today, I'm going to tell you about one you've probably never heard of, all right? It's another three-letter organization that starts with a W, and again, I'm talking about the WMO. I'm going to talk about what they're doing, and I'm going to show you how it helps to tie in what the WEF's, the World Economic Forum's agenda is for 2030. Of course, the Great Reset. Now, you've heard a lot about the Great Reset, a lot about Agenda 2030, but there's so many questions as to how is it actually going to happen, and that is what I am going to break down in this video. All right, I'm going to break down what the WMO is. I'm going to talk about what they're doing right now, and this is not a secret. All right, in fact, this is all out in the open. Have you read the book? Because I have the book, and so today I am going to show you facts. I'm going to show you charts. I'm going to show you quotes to show you what is going on. Like I said, this is not in secret. This is not a conspiracy. Now, some of what I'm talking about you already know about, but you do not know the full story. So I'm going to break it down, who the players are, what this means to the economy of the US and for the world, and of course for ourselves, all right? Our wealth, our future, and of course, like always, I'm going to show you, like I said, facts, data, charts, quotes, all right? So we have a lot to cover, so let's go. All right, welcome back. If you're new to the channel, my name is Mark Moss, and I like to talk about money. I like to change the way you think about money, because unfortunately, almost everything that you've learned is completely wrong. And by changing the way you think about money and the way that you interact with money, that is where freedom comes from. That's where options come from in your life for yourself, for your family, for your future generations. Now, if you want to help me get these topics to more people, take one quick second and click on that like button so the algorithm sends it out there. They do not like these types of videos, and so it's already going to have a hard time. So if you want to help me out, like the video, maybe share the video, because we need to get this out. And again, this is not conspiracy stuff. This is directly out of the book. All right, this is research that I've done, and this matters. Now, a lot of you might listen to this and go, why does it matter? But make sure you stick around to the end, because everybody has been asking what this Great Reset is. What is going to happen? You know, the whole you'll own nothing, you'll be happy by 2030. How does that happen? What happens over the next 10 years? And if you want to know what happens play by play over the next 10 years, then I am going to break it down for you right here, okay? So this is gonna be a long video, but I have a lot to cover. Now, like I said, I've talked about the three-letter government organizations, the NGOs, the non-government organizations. These are non-elected leaders that are really running the world. Three letters: IMF, the WF, World Economic Forum, of course you know about that. The World Health Organization, of course you know about that. The World Trade Organization, you probably don't know that much about. And today we are talking about the World, the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, which you probably don't know. So yes, the World Economic Forum, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and the United Nations. All right, so I'm gonna start at the top, and we're gonna break this down. So you probably know by now about the Paris Accord. All right, now this has made a lot of news. If you can recall, this came out in 2016. President Obama put us into the Paris Accord. President Trump pulled us out of the Paris Accord. And Joe Biden's very first day in office, his goal was, the first day is to put us back into the Paris Accord. So you've heard about this. It's to save the environment, of course, right? And who doesn't love the environment? Now look, I'm a surfer, all right? I'm in the ocean every single day. I'm a snowboarder. I'm in the mountains. I love the mountains. They're pristine, they're clean. I have kids. I have tried to pass on my passions for them to be in the water, to be in the mountains, to be in nature. I love nature. I'm in nature probably more than almost anybody watching this video. I love nature. I want to preserve this world. I want the oceans to be clean, the mountains to be clean, and I want that for my grandchildren's grandchildren. So this is not about the environment. So just bear that in mind. All right, so the Paris Accord, Obama put us in, Trump pulled us out the very first day. Biden put us back in. So what is it? So we officially rejoined February 19th. And I want to break down what most people think it is, and then we're going to talk about what it really is and what it really entails. Because if you want to know what's going to happen over the next 10 years, what Agenda 2030 is, this is the piece that you have been missing, okay? So what is it? Let's talk about what it is. So one, it is a legally binding treaty, all right? So this is, the countries have jumped in and it's legally binding. Now, what does that really mean? Each country is legally obligated to each other, but I'm pretty sure that governments break promises all the time. But it's a legally binding, of course, like I said, it was originated in 2016 when President Obama was there. 195 countries are supposedly into it, but really that's the high level stuff. What is it really? All right, what's the goal? What are they trying to achieve with supposedly with the Paris Accord? Well, the goal is to limit global warming, sounds great, to below 2 degrees Celsius to what they consider pre-industrial levels. So what does that mean? All right, so I'll just blow this up. This is, again, I want to give you the facts. So this is directly from their website. Again, legally binding, limit global warming, 2 degrees, preferably to 1.5 degrees below what it was pre-industrial. All right, so we're going to talk about that. What the heck is pre-industrial? All right, so who is involved in this? Who are the key players? Now, the IPCC, keep that in mind, okay? We're going to be talking about the IPCC, and that stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Sounds pretty important, doesn't it? And again, that was founded in 1988. So they've been pushing this agenda for quite a long time, since 1988, and now it's all being wrapped up in the Paris Accord in 2016. All right, again, and then it's backed by the WMO. We've talked about that. Okay, so just remember the IPCC. We're going to come back to that. That's an important piece to understand. Now, first of all, we talked about the goal is to bring global warming down. Okay, it's great. I guess it's too hot. If you live in places where it's cold, I guess that's pretty good. We just moved from California to Puerto Rico, and we like it because it's warmer than California. So good is relative. Good, bad for who? I like Puerto Rico because it's warmer than California, so an extra degree sounds pretty good to me. But anyway, pre-industrial levels. So let's take a look at just this goal, all right? So first off, they want to bring it down to pre-industrial. Now, what's pre-industrial? So there was the Industrial Revolution. There's been 5 technological revolutions in about the last 250 years. The Industrial Revolution, we brought people out of the farms into the factories. That was the first one. And that was between 1850 to 1900. All right. That's what they say. Here's the problem with this right off the bat. Okay. So right off the bat, we have a problem because per Google and per Wikipedia, the Industrial Revolution was actually 1760 to 1840. And so the reason why this is a problem is they want to bring down it to below pre-industrial of 1850, but the problem is the Industrial Revolution was already over by 1850. So it makes sense, right? Sure, it makes sense. Like, hey, we should bring the temperature back to before we had all the machines and all the factories, because that's when all the emissions started, right? So let's go back to before that. But the problem is the Industrial Revolution actually started before that. So their goal right off the bat is wrong. The other problem that we have with this is that the steam engine, the engines, which are supposedly producing all the carbon, was actually out in 1784. Here you can see James Watt, father of the modern steam engine. Here, 1844. Again, 1784, which is about 75 years before they started calculating. The other thing is that we need to take into a lot of other information. All right, I'm just setting the stage here. We're going to go deep. But we have to look at global warming, and this is the global average temperatures, and you can see that they want to go back before here, but you can see that right here, the temperatures were pretty flat. So they want to, and then you can see them start taking off here. So it might make sense to start right here, right? But like they want to start here when temperatures were already flat. So the baselines are all off. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is that the majority of the Earth temperatures per NASA scientists really come from solar and volcanic flares. So volcanoes erupt, they put tons of carbon up into the air, ash, it blocks the sun, temperatures come down, they come back up. So the solar, the way the suns move, the way the volcanoes happen, that has more to do with the Earth's temperature than anything else, per the scientists. And what we can see here is this is a reconstruction of that based off of scientists. Now, how do they really know what the solar and volcanic flares were from 1700s? But they've put this together. And what we can see again is up until this period of about 1750, it had stayed pretty cool. And now it's started to go up. So is this responsible for it? Is it the steam engines? Is it the Industrial Revolution? So we don't have this baseline. So that's just for starters. All right, so let's just set the stage with that. All right, but the goal, either way, 2 degrees Celsius below pre-industrial levels. Okay, great. Will it actually work? Let's take a look at that. So here's what we have to do in order to achieve those goals. All right, so we need to go to 60% renewable for the entire world. Again, remember this date, by 2030. So we need to transfer over the next 9 years all of the energy in the entire world, from your cars, your airplanes, your boat, everything. 60% of it needs to go to renewable. So we need electric airplanes. We need to reduce coal by 78%. Now, coal is where we generate most of electricity around the world because it's very, very cheap. So when you live in poor countries, well, anywhere for that matter, if you're a poor person, you need cheap energy. Otherwise, you can't drive your car, your food prices go up, you can't travel, those types of things. So we need to reduce coal by 78%, our cheapest. We need to reduce oil by 37% and natural gas by 25%. And then, remember what the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum said, that you're gonna eat less meat? That's because they say that farmers have to cut methane by 24%, again, by 2030. That's where we need to go to do that, they say, right? Where are we? Well, the Department of Energy forecasts that by 27% by 2050. So they say 60% by 2030. The DOE says maybe we can do 27% by 2050. It's quite a ways off. They also say that the demand for coal is rising. More of the world is coming up. We're bringing people out of poverty. We're bringing people up into prosperity. They have factories and jobs and they can shop now. And so coal demand is actually rising. Natural gas is climbing, right? And as those people come up, as the rest of the world comes up, they need to eat. And so we're gonna need to continue to feed them. So that's where we are versus where we need to go. Now, if you start to get the point, maybe this seems like a losing battle. So let's take a look at this. So in 2020, as of last year, we're already 1.2 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels. So they want us to be 2 degrees below, which means now it's like 3.2 that we have to reduce down. All right. Now, is that possible? Well, let's take a look. Don't take my word for this. Again, let's go to the facts. So we can see here that this says that global temperatures are already 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The UN admits that the Paris climate deal was a fraud, meaning that we won't be able to achieve those goals, but it gets even deeper than that. And of course, I'm going to break that down for you. I'm just trying to set the stage here. We can see that CO2 emissions that the nations pledged. So I'm going to explain how this works. But basically, the nations said, this is what I'm going to do. And this country says, well, this is what I'm going to do. There's no standard of what the countries have to do. We're going to break that down. But basically, what they're pledging to do brings us nowhere close to where we need to go. All right. And then we can see James Hansen. He was the father of climate change. James Hansen, the father of climate change awareness, calls Paris talks a fraud. Same thing. The talks to reach this deal beyond 2020 is there's no actions, no promises, not going to happen. All right. So again, I'm setting the stage, but this is all going to come together, and you're going to understand where Agenda 2030 is taking us and how this all unfolds. All right. So are countries committed? Like I said, there's no standard. Like everyone has to do this. No. Instead, each country just says, well, I'll do this or I'll do this. And then there's, of course, something that's different between what are they actually saying and what are they actually doing. So let's take a look at this. Are countries really committed to this goal? So to see if countries are really committed to the goal, the first thing we want to do is let's get a baseline, right? So if you're trying to go somewhere, it's important to understand where you're going, but then you have to understand where you are today. What's the baseline? And then we can track our progress from there. So let's look at the baseline. This is the CO2 emissions broken down by country, the top 10 emitters. Now I have this chart we'll bring up pretty big here for you so you can see what this is. And As you might guess, maybe, I don't know, United States is sitting here in number 2. So it is a big emitter. But what you might notice is that China is, of course, number 1. And China is number 1, and they are double what the US is. So really, if anybody should be cutting down, you would think it would be China. Typically, when you're trying to achieve something big, you try to take action on the biggest thing first, where you can make the most progress. And so the US is in number 2, but China is 2 times larger. So that's just the baseline. That's where we're at. Back to now, each country doesn't have a mandate. Each country pledges what they're going to do. As a matter of fact, these are called NDCs. This stands for Nationally Determined Contribution. So I'm a country, and this is what I contribute to this goal, and each country does that. And basically what they are is they're a 5-year agreement where a country says, I'm going to do this over the next 5 years. These are my goals, and these are my strategies to achieve it. And of course, these are how I'm going to measure this. And this is where it all starts coming together. So the US, which is the number 2 emitter, it's a big emitter, it's a big country. And we'll get into broken down by capita and stuff like that, but it's the biggest emitter. But China is double that. But the US has the biggest goal. The goal that the US has pledged is to reduce CO2 by 28% from 2005 level. So by 2025, which is 4 years from now, the goal is to be 28% less than they were a decade ago. And you can see per the Paris Accord website, this is their pledge. So this is the USA, this is the Paris Agreement, this is what's been ratified, 26 to 28% below 2005 levels. That's their goal, or 10 to 17% below 1990 levels. So that's what they pledged. Sounds good, right? It's a good baseline. Now let's take a look and see what the other countries have pledged. All right, now just real quick, the US cutting back, there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about real quick before we jump into the countries. So the CO2 per capita. So what does that mean? So the United States has a lot of people, 330 million people about. Other countries don't have anywhere near that. So rather than look at the amount of output or CO2 emissions per country, you want to look at it per person. Because if a country hardly has any people, of course it's going to have less emissions, right? So what we can see is the CO2 per capita, per person, has actually been declining over the last 20 years. As a matter of fact, the CO2 change is down. It's down 30% since 2020. So the US, of course, if you live in the United States, you know this, right? The gas has been getting better. We've been moving to renewables. Every company, the auto manufacturer, they're all getting squeezed by the EPA to be more and more carbon friendly, which is great. I have nothing against that. But look, we are down already 30% since 2020. Now, we'll explain what this means for you. And so we've been declining for the last 20 years, as you can see, the steady decline. That's great. The US has been doing their part. You've been doing your part for the United States. You've been paying more for your gas. You've been paying more for everything in order to achieve those goals. That's good. What about India and China? Let's look at them. So India's target is to go 35% below 2005 CO2, which sounds really good, right? But not per capita, not by total, but by GDP, as a percentage of GDP. So you could say, hey, we emit 100 tons of carbon, or we emit 10 pounds of carbon per person, per capita, or you can say that our emission is a percentage of our GDP. I'm going to talk about that. So India's target is 35% below their carbon to GDP, and China's goal, you're going to love this, China's goal is to peak by 2030. So if you remember from the chart, they're already emitting double, twice as much as the US, which is down 30%, and planning to go down another 30%. Not China, they're already double, and their goal is to peak. That means they're still going up. Let me show you this. So this is, again, from their website. So this is Paris, India, all right? 30 to 35% below 2005 emissions by GDP. So this means nothing. So let me explain what this means. So if I say that carbon emissions are 10% of GDP, and my goal is to get that down by 30%, well, I could cut down on carbon, okay? Or 2, I could raise my GDP. Now, if you know anything about what's going on in the world right now, especially after COVID, a lot of the manufacturing, we saw how fragile the supply chains were in China. So a lot of the manufacturing is coming out of China and it's starting to go to other places. That way the supply chains aren't completely dependent on China. Now, who is the biggest recipient of all this? India. So India's economy is booming. India's economy is the next China. They're growing super fast. If you look to invest in international markets, China is a place that you would want to be. India is a place that you want to be. So their GDP is growing. So they're not trying to reduce their emissions at all. All they have to do, they can continue to raise their emissions as long as their GDP is growing faster. And of course, the GDP is a number they state and can be whatever they want it to be. So that's interesting. The next thing is, now let's look at China's. Again, this is directly from the website. I try to give you the facts. This is China, per the Paris Agreement, peak CO2 emissions by 2030. So again, like I said, they are going to continue to go up as the United States is, we'll call it, hamstringing themselves to bring it down. Now, let's compare these, all right? So the US is decreasing per capita. India's output is already up 100% since 2000. China's output is up 150%. So China's up 150, India's up 100, the US is down 30, all right? Now let's look at this in some charts because I want to show you this in some data. So this is the per capita. So this is, again, per person. It's not right to look at the total amount. We want to look at this per person. And we can see that here is China. This is China. This is India per person. And this is the US going down. So the US has been getting better and better and better, and these countries have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. All right, now that's the percentage change, and this is the actual amount, the total amount. So you might say, well, the percentage change isn't fair because the US was bigger or something. Okay, well, let's look at the total then. So again, if we look at the total, you can see that the United States is down. And you can see that the total amount of both these, as I said, about 100 and 150%. All right. Now, why does all this matter? Why do you care about this? Well, you might care if you earn money and you have to pay for your family to live and you earn a living and you're trying to save for your retirement. You might care. All right. So the reason why is because the cost of the compliance. So why do we stay in? Why is the U.S. continuing to make it harder, make it more expensive for businesses to operate, for consumers to buy products, when other countries aren't doing anything? And as a matter of fact, they're going up. Now, per the SBA, they say that compliance costs for the United States are $1.75 trillion it costs just for the compliance alone for this. And they say that that's about 12 to 14% of our GDP is spent trying to comply with this. All right. So why stay in? Why would we stay in this? All right. So let's talk about that. Now, as I said at the beginning, this is about the NGOs. These are the non-government organizations. These are non-elected leaders. These are people that you don't get to vote for. You don't even know who they are, right? And basically what they do is they're the ones that are setting up this plan, and they want companies that produce goods, that produce emissions to, they're going to allow them to produce even more emissions, and then they're going to offset that with carbon credits. I'm going to break this down. But where do they get the carbon credits from? You're a country, you want to emit carbon, you have to buy carbon credits to offset that. So you're going to buy them from me. But where did I get them from? From thin air. Let's break this down for you because it is interesting. All right. So here is kind of how this works. So here's the countries. So this is, USA. This is all the countries here. And these countries have businesses. Let's make it a building, right? So they have a building. They have businesses, and those businesses produce goods, and those goods get sold to people like you and I. All right. So as these businesses produce goods that they get sold to you and I, they produce emissions. All right. All right. We want to bring that down, whatever. Okay. By 2030 over here, guess what? We still have businesses that are still producing goods, that are still selling products to you and I. It's the same thing. Over here, as I said, China is actually going to peak. They're going up. India is going up. So in 2030, under this Paris Accord, India, China, other countries are still going up. What is the difference between now and then? It's not reducing emissions. Here's where it comes in. Remember I talked about the IPCC. All right, this is where the IPCC comes in. So now countries can emit emissions. By 2030, countries still emit emissions. The difference is now they have to buy carbon credits. That's the difference. So where do they buy these carbon credits? Again, from the IPCC. Where does the IPCC get them? Out of thin air. As a matter of fact, they create this exchange over here where these are bought and sold on Wall Street, and they make money. How much money? They make trillions of dollars creating these carbon credits, trading them around. Corporations trade them, Wall Street trades them, and they buy and sell them to these countries. So the difference is over here, countries are producing emissions. Over here, countries are producing emissions. The emissions didn't go down. But per the Paris Accord, the only thing that changed is now these countries have to pay trillions of dollars to do this. Interesting, huh? Now, why? Why would these countries decide to pay? I mean, I get it, right? If we're all noble and we want to save the world and let's all reduce emissions, and I'm all for that. But as I'm saying, they're not going to reduce emissions. As a matter of fact, their emissions are going up. So why would they just decide to pay? Like, why would they willing to do that? I'm a sovereign country. Why would I pay? Well, that is where it starts to get even more interesting. So let's break it down. So why would countries go along? Well, the reason why is because the U.S., and this is why it was so important for the U.S. to be in this. The U.S. is the one that puts up the money for the slush fund. That money is then used to pay countries, and the influencers of those countries drag countries in. So let me show you back to this, what I'm talking about here. So the U.S. puts up about $100 billion in a fund. So that's a big $100 billion fund. The U.S. puts it up. If you're a U.S. taxpayer, you're putting it up. That money is then going to pay influence. So each country has their people, right? You know, lobbying and governments get paid off to pass certain laws. So each country has these influencers, and this money is then going to these countries like, hey, here's 10 billion for you and 2 billion for you and 5 billion for you and 700 million for you if you can get your country on board. At the same time, we do massive media. The world is going to die. The world is going to die. Everybody needs to get in. The Paris Accord, the Paris Accord. So it's this massive PR push at the same time. And hey, I'm all for saving the environment. I love the environment as much as anybody. But if the goal is not to bring emissions down, then what is the goal? Remember we talked about this? Let me break it down. All right, so why would countries go along? As I said, the U.S. puts in the money, $100 billion. That money goes to these developing countries to get them on board and get them to buy into the Paris Accord. Sort of like, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not going to tell you, but I'll ask you a question. How do you think it was possible for all the governments of the world to lock their people down at the exact same time at the snap of a finger? In unison. I mean, when has the world ever been coordinated on anything? Boom, at the same time. Then think about the WHO, World Health Organization. Remember this. And then think about how President of Belarus and lots of other smaller countries have said that the WHO was going to pay them $900 million to lock their country down. I'll leave you with that, let you think about that. So 2030, the agenda is 2030. 2030 is the big payday. 2030 is the key year. 2030, remember China, India going to keep going up, and 2030 is the key year. That's when they have to start buying their credits. The UN has decided this. This is the Sustainable Development Goals Program. This is off the UN's website directly. And you know the 2030 agenda, we've been talking about it over and over and over, and now you understand what the 2030 agenda is. Now, what can you expect? Now, regardless of where you live in the world, whether you're in the United States or not, this is what's important, because what can you expect? Well, as emissions have to come down, or you have to pay for carbon credits, where is that money going to come from? Well, that means that companies, businesses will have to spend more money to produce goods. So that means production costs go up. Well, if production costs go up, well, guess what? Then consumers' prices go up. And then governments are going to have to pay carbon credits, so their prices go up. So goods and services get more expensive, and then taxes get to go up on top of that. All right, now at the same time, if you remember in this book, we're calling for a great reset of capitalism. A great reset of capitalism, if you can remember, and the goal is that the US falls behind. They're calling for equality. Read the book. They're calling for equality, and equality not bringing the rest of the world up, equality in bringing the US down. The US will fall behind because the US is already down 30% and we have to go down another 30%, which means we have to get rid of more manufacturing. We have to offshore all that. We can't produce oil anymore. We can't produce natural gas anymore, so we have to buy all our energy. We can't do any manufacturing. We have to be dependent on the rest of the world. At the same time, we have to put up all the money to get the rest of the world to come up. The coal industry is gone. Studies show that over 400,000 jobs will be gone. Here's a study right here. By 2035, there will be an annual average loss of 400,000 jobs, an annual loss, 400,000 jobs a year. Total income loss of more than 20,000 for a family of four. So if you're a family of four, you can expect by 2035, your income to go down by 20,000, and a GDP loss of over $2.5 trillion. Now, the GDP right now is about 3.5, so it's going to go down by 2.5. If you're doing the math in your head, that's more than half. So let's take a look at what this does. The Paris Agreement job loss by sector. So computers, electronics, down. Textiles, furniture, paper, coal mining, of course, down, and machinery down, all right? We have how's the Paris Agreement would affect US jobs? Well, as you might imagine, jobs go down. So that's not so good, is it? All right, now research by the Global Initiative in this report right here, Economic Consulting, they say, like I said, reduce GDP by $3 trillion by the year 2040, eliminate 6.5 million industrial sector jobs. Now, seems like unemployment's already pretty high. Seems like we would be trying to get employment up, not going down, but apparently it is. Lower average household income by 7,000%. So your income is going down, your jobs are being lost. At the same time, inflation, prices are going up through. Taxes are going up, goods and services are going through the roof. Here's some charts that I have. So this is the change in GDP. So by 2025, the average of 2022 by 2030, remember the goal, 2030, and then by 2034 to 2040. So that's what you can expect over the next 10 to 15 years. And then that's for GDP. And this is for household income by 2025, down. Remember, this is the baseline, so it's down by 2022 to 2031, and by 2034 to 2040. So that's, you want to know how we get there by 2030, what the Agenda 2030, how does this all happen by the year 2030? Now you are starting to get the big picture. Now, why? Why, right? Well, of course, it's the same old. The poor get poorer. The poor can't afford prices to go up. The poor can't afford energy prices to go up. The poor can't afford jobs to be lost. At the same time, the rich get richer. As a matter of fact, all of this wealth, as I said, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars gets transferred to the wealth. And by 2030 is the $1 trillion payday. Of course, who? Who is going to profit? Well, you have, per Forbes, Blood and Al Gore. Remember Al Gore? The one that's been telling us the polar ice caps were going to be gone, by 2009? And they're still there? They're making a killing off of anti-carbon investment hype. Their words, not mine. As you can see here, Al Gore purchases carbon credits from a company he himself owns. So they're selling carbon credits. Again, where did they come from? How did they get them? Well, he buys them from a company that he owns. A self-appointed expert on global warming has been purchasing carbon credits. And he predicted the North Pole ice caps would be melted in 2009, and of course they haven't. So that is the big picture of what is going on. That is how Agenda 2030 unrolls. If you want to know how it gets there, read the book, read their website. It's not a conspiracy. It's all out there in the open for everybody. So what does this mean for us? What does this mean for you and I? Well, it means that this is unfortunately what we can expect right now. All right. Now, I like to say that the future is not set. The future is what we want it to be. So if you don't like the way this sounds, then I would advise you to share this video with somebody. I would advise for you to go and read the book, educate yourself, pass on the information. And if this is the future that you want, then let's work hard to make sure that future doesn't become a reality. Other than that, we need to learn to protect ourselves. That's why you're watching these videos, to learn about money. We need to be putting our assets outside of the financial system and putting our assets into things that store value, because as this market comes down, the thing that we have to focus on is purchasing power. We want to buy hard, real, tangible assets. But that's it. I'm not going to dive super deep into the investment side of this right now. Today, most of my videos talk about this, but I wanted to break this down because, again, I want to change the way you think about this. This isn't about the environment. I love the environment. I want to save the environment. I do my part. I recycle. I'm all for driving renewables. I owned a solar company at one point. I'm all for it. But I don't want to see average people get crushed while the rich continue to distort and destroy and manipulate. All right, so that's it. That's what I got for you today. Leave me some thumbs up on this video if you like it. This was a lot of work, I'm sure you can tell. And if you don't like the video, give me a thumbs down. That's okay. But leave me a comment and let me know. I don't want to hear, Mark, you're an idiot. Mark, you don't know what you're talking about. If I got something wrong, tell me. What did I get wrong? What facts do you want to dispute? What did I get wrong specifically? I'd love to... maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to have a conversation with you. So tell me what I got wrong down below. And if you have any questions, leave a question down below. I am starting to grab questions out and I'm making new videos on my new Market Disruptors channel. If I grab your question and answer it on my new channel, then I'm going to send you $25 in Bitcoin. There's a link in the description for the new channel down below. Ask your questions. That's what I got for you today. All right. To your success. I'm out.